Good morning and good Sunday. My name is Leon Dunkley. I minister here at North Universalist Chapel Society, or North Chapel in Woodstock, Vermont. It's good to see you this morning. Today is Sunday, July the 5th. It's one day after Independence Day. And the title of this morning's reflection is The Theology of Friendship. True friendship can offer a passageway that leads to the fullness of life. How does it do that? That's the God part, that's the theology. We all have this extra room in life for love, for peace, for balance, for grace, and for tranquility. It can be hard to see sometimes, especially considering all the difficulties that we face in life. There are real difficulties in life, and we're seeing that now. There's so much loss and so much uncertainty. How does one pray? How does one remain hopeful and spiritually alive when our future is so unsure? In these times, in our days, how does one anticipate the coming of the good news? Now, that's not a hard question for me. I am a student of Cornel West. He isn't afraid of this kind of a challenge against the odds and against the grain. This man remains a prisoner of hope. And at the same time, he says, I have no reason to be optimistic. So there's tension between those two ideas, to be a prisoner of hope and then yet not to be optimistic. Because to be optimistic is to be confident about the future, and Cornel West is not. Clearly, the future that opens before us is uncertain. We don't know what it holds. We don't know what's coming next, and this is where the mystery, the God part, theology comes into play. Now, I have a relatively new friend named Nancy McDonald-Ladd. She ministers to the River Road Unitarian Universalist Church in Bethesda, Maryland. She's great. I really like her. Recently, she wrote a book entitled After the Good News, Progressive Faith Beyond Optimism. In it, she tries to explore the distinction between hope and optimism. She writes, optimism tells a preordained narrative. It is an assertion that the scales have already been tipped toward triumph. Hope is different. Like faith, hope is the exact opposite of certainty. It does not presume an outcome for good or for ill. It lies in the waiting moment when the tug from both directions is not fully resolved. It moves in the humble spaces that we open when we allow ourselves to be uncertain. It is the possibility, though, not the inevitability of a better way. Hope is the possibility, not the inevitability of a better way. For my new friend, Nancy, hope and optimism depend on the absence or the presence of certainty. And we don't have that right now. But you know what? Life is complicated, and sometimes I don't want to think this hard about things. I just want to rest in something that's easier, on stronger shoulders than complex thoughts can provide. And I was glad to read a poem on the subject of hope and optimism that was written by a colleague of ours named Victoria Safford. It's a beautiful poem. She writes, our mission is to plant ourselves at the gates of hope, not the prudent gates of optimism, which are somewhat narrower, not the stalwart and boring gates of common sense, nor the strident gates of self-righteousness, which creak on shrill and angry hinges. We cannot hear us there. People cannot pass through, nor the cheerful, flimsy garden gate of everything's gonna be all right. But a different, sometimes lonely place, a place of truth-telling about your own soul first and its condition, the place of resistance and defiance, the piece of the ground from which you see the world, both as it is and as it could be, as it will be, the place from which you glimpse not only struggle, but the joy of struggle. And we stand there beckoning and calling, telling people what we are seeing and asking people what they see. I like that Nancy used this poem to introduce her book. I can understand why she did it. It's lovely. And so is our colleague, Victoria Safford. Thank you, my friend. It is great when life and art are one and the same. Stronger and more broad than the shoulders of new friends and the beautiful things that they bring into this world are the shoulders of old friends, true friends, and dear ones. I have a relatively new friend named Nancy MacDonald Ladd, and I also have a relatively old friend named Eric Kamenetsky. I've known him since forever ago. We were both leaders in the youth movement. We held on to one another. We were both deeply committed, body and soul. We made our commitment real in every way we could. We sang it from the rooftops of the world. We painted it on our bodies, and we held on to one another. We held on tight in good times and in tempest. We made decisions by consensus. And when I'm shaken in life, still now, all these years later, I know that I can call on him. Eric is not as young as Nancy. He's not as kind as Nancy, and he's not as funny. He's funny looking, maybe, and he's pretty old. So he's got those two things working for him. Of course, I'm just busting on him. We have a lot of fun together. He is one of the people that I trust most in all the world. I wouldn't trade my friendship with him for anything. I don't care how old or funny looking he is. Simon and Garfunkel shared a song about old friends in 1968. Old Friends is a song about old friends. I still listen to it. It's beautiful. It's a short song, and the words are these. Old friends sat on the park bench like bookends. A newspaper blown through the grass, and it falls on the round toes of the high shoes of the old friends. Old friends, winter companions, these old men, lost in their overcoats and waiting for the sunset. Can you imagine us years from today, sharing a park bench quietly? How terribly strange to be 70. Old friends, memory brushes the same years, silently sharing the same fears. One of the most amazing things about Old Friends is that these two men, Simon and Garfunkel, wrote this song when they were so young. So much wisdom in so few years. Life is short, but God resides, I think, on the strong, broad shoulders of folks like these. It is ever and always a wonderful experience walking through life with people like Eric. And looking back at the younger folks like Nancy and saying, come on, hustle, catch up with us, and bring us your hope. It gives us better access to the fullness of life, the fullness that makes the whole world feel brand new. For this, I have such gratitude. Please rise in body and in spirit as you are willing and able, and join us in the singing of our opening hymn, For All That Is Our Life. This is the moment in our service for the sharing of joys and concerns. If you have a joy or a concern in your heart, I invite you to call its energy forth right now and send it over to North Chapel so we can gather the joys and the concerns and the sorrows of our entire community, and we can gather them together as one. Call out the names of those you care for. Call up the memory of those we love, and send their good light over to North Chapel at this time. Ritually, we light 3 candles this morning. One for those of us who are ill. We light a candle in the name of recovery. Another candle for those who suffer for the lack of resources. We light a candle that our needs may be well met. And for those of us who are caught in cycles of fear, anxiety, or anger, we light a candle for strength and resilience, a candle for courage. For all that is in our hearts, may we hold them right now. May we treasure what we know and what we love. May we be forever grateful for these days we spend together, these days that have our names written upon them. For this and for so many other things, I will light one more candle. May we hold all of this in compassionate community as we enter a time of meditation and prayerfulness. So the wise ones say that there are two teachers of life's great lessons. There's a teacher of love and there's a teacher of cruelty. You can learn certain things from love that you can never learn from cruelty. And you can learn certain things from cruelty that you could never learn from love. Now, if you trust somebody enough, if you love someone enough, it's possible to learn both kinds of lessons in their presence. If we know that even though we're talking about something that's painful and cruel, if we know that we're loved and held and whole, it's possible to learn from cruelty, even from someone that we care for, even from someone that we love. Now, I have an old friend, a dear friend, who I pretend not to like very much. We're in a decades-long, playful, loving feud, in a way. He is able to push me towards kindness and towards compassion in a way that I don't let many people push me. I trust him deeply, and I allow him to do this. We fence with each other intellectually. We play little mind games, usually like, sarcastically, just, to have a little bit of fun with each other. But the reason that we play these games is to sharpen the way we think. There was one day, and I'm sort of refashioning this conversation in my memory, but I remember the point, so I might take some liberties with what actually happened. I don't remember the specifics, but here's what I remember that's worth the telling, is that I remember that he asked me about the word integrity. He said, "What do you think about integrity?" Okay. I said, I responded very quickly, and I said, integrity is when you say what you mean and you mean what you say. It's a consistency between walking the path and talking the path. And he said, I agree, but let me ask you this. If a bank robber comes up to you and says, I'm going to go to the bank and I'm going to steal all of your money, and then does precisely that, if he does precisely what he said he was going to do, does the bank robber have integrity? And I responded, or reacted actually, dismissively, and I said, robbing a bank is immoral. I tried to dismiss the question. He said, I agree, but that's not what I asked you. I asked if a bank robber says that he's going to steal all of your money and then proceeds to steal all of your money, like he said he was going to do, if he walks and talks the same message in life, does he have integrity? I didn't realize that the mind game I thought that the mind game we were playing was about the definition of the word integrity, but it was really about the values that I attach to the word, the implicit bias that I have about the idea of integrity. Earlier, when Nancy MacDonald Ladd was talking about optimism, the balance, the story of optimism is already implied in the word. Optimism feels like the attitude towards truth. The arc of justice is already tilted in our balance, in our favor. I thought the same was true of integrity, and it's not. I started to think about integrity as like the soundness of the hull of a ship, and any ship, a pirate ship or a canoe that gets you across the water, to have dinner with loved ones and family. If the hull of the ship has integrity, it doesn't take on water. It has nothing to do with what its intentions are, or with where its destination is. It has to do with whether or not the hull is intact. I like that Eric pushed me to see, to think more clearly, to think more sharply. We play a lot of games with each other. One time, we were both living in Durham, North Carolina. Both of us, I've known him since we were children, since we were teenagers anyway. when we were both living in North Carolina, it was after he had become a lawyer and after I had become a college professor. He was running a law agency in Durham, North Carolina, and I was teaching at Duke University at the time. And he called me up on the phone because he was thinking about making a big change in his life. And he said, hey, I heard about a seminary, Unitarian Universalist Seminary out in Chicago. I heard about a prospective student weekend, and it's happening in October. He's leaving this message on my answering machine, So I'm alone in the room listening to him say that he's committed himself to going to look at this seminary as a prospective student. He leaves me his flight information, and then he tells me that he has chosen me as his roommate and has signed me up, and he hangs up the phone. So I had this choice, right? Competitive friendship that we have. I had this choice to either stay home and blow off the Chicago deal and risk his making fun of me for the rest of my life, or I could kind of comply and go along with it and see what happens next. So I did go. And we had a great deal of fun that weekend. It was very insightful. It changed my life. I did not go to that seminary, as you know. I went to Berkeley, California. Eric did go to Meadville Lombard in Chicago, and I went to the Starr King School for the ministry. And we came out on the other end really interested in how our ministries had been shaped and how we had grown as people. But the thing that remained was that playful spirit that we have, that combative, fencing spirit that we have to try to sharpen our minds and push each other to become better and smarter and sharper and more compassionate than we are. There was this one very funny day that we had together. We were both at a conference on Star Island, which is off the coast of Portsmouth, New Hampshire. It's a camp and conference center that runs week-long conferences. And at these conferences, there is a minister of the week. And that minister's job is to do a series of chapel services, either in the morning or in the evening or both. And he had been chosen by this conference to be the minister of the week. One of the privileges for being the minister of the week is that you get to bring along your partner, your wife, your husband, or your romantic partner. It's called, it's called the minister plus one, because the minister's job is a little bit lonely sometimes, and it's really, really awesome to be able to have someone who you can talk to and share the island experience with. Now, usually you pick your spouse or your romantic partner. Eric had reached out to his partner, to his wife, and she was not able to come. She was too busy at work. She couldn't afford the time. So Eric called me and said, hey, are you busy during these days? Would you like to come to Star Island for a week? And we can have some fun. I haven't been back there in many years. So I did go. It was a lot of fun. I spent a lot of time out there. Every chance I get, I would go to Star Island. But a funny thing happened, okay? So in the very beginning of the week, they gather people together and they introduce, the workshop leaders and the chair of the conference, and they introduce the minister of the week. So we were in this great big hall, this cafeteria, and everybody was eating and plates were clanking and food was being passed and people were joking, happy to see each other, trying to find places to sit down and have some fun, to relax. Someone goes up to the microphone and says, hey, I have an introduction to make. I just want to make sure that you can all see him here, being that we're all gathered from one of our first meals of the week. And he says, Eric Kamenetsky, Reverend Kamenetsky from Seattle, from the Edmonds Church, from actually just north of Seattle, is here, and he is our minister of the week. And then everybody applauds, hooray, and welcomes him. And then he said, and Leon Dunkley is his plus one. It was kind of a joke. A lot of people on island know who I am, and I knew a lot of the people in that conference. So when I was introduced as his plus one, a lot of people knew that the announcer was making a joke. There was one woman at our table, though, who did not know that this was a joke. So she, when we sat down after standing up to receive our our welcome. She said, "Now, I didn't realize that that you and Eric were a team." And I said, "Yes." And she thought that we were a couple. So she said, did you say that you were living in Vermont, that you'd moved to Vermont recently?" And I said, "Yes, I have." And then she turned to Eric, who was filling his mouth with food, She said, "Didn't you say that you lived in Seattle?" And he said, "Yes," nodding yes. And then she turned back to me and said, "How does that work?" And I said, not understanding where she was going, I responded, the way I thought to respond, which was to say, I don't really think about Eric that much of the time. And when I need to reach out to him and call him, I call him. I think she was a little bit surprised that we were not more loving and caring and more romantic towards each other. So she looked away until we finally realized that she did think that we were a couple, and we had to disabuse her of that notion. But it was a beautiful moment to think about how long a time he and I have been walking the front porch of that island and walking into churches, into sanctuaries, walking across parks and through cities, walking into each other's lives with messages of hope and care and love. It was interesting to think about how long a time it's been and how much depth we've acquired along the way in the building of our friendship. We believe in Unitarian Universalism. We sing it. We paint it on our bodies. Here's what I mean. We love pretty hard on each other, and we push each other as hard as we can to try to make what we know of our faith something that's worthy of our time, that's worthy of fostering the best that lies within us. The warmth of the smile that you can see on his face and the warmth of the smile that you can see on mine takes decades to build. It happens through great difficulty. It happens through enormous joy. If we find what I would call a theology of friendship, the God of old friends, as it were, if we're lucky enough to find it, it's because we've journeyed down a road that has been honest and has been compassionate, that has been loving and that has been fair. And at the end of that journey and all along the way, we found ways of connecting with each other, playfully and competitively, beautifully and compassionately. When I think about the God of friendship, the theology of friendship, the God of old friends, I think about that muscle that we can build that keeps us strong and safe in good times and in tempest. In closing, I can say that if we can love one another honestly, if we can accept ourselves truly, if we can listen for those aspects of each other's lives that need care, that need nurture, and if we can remain available to them, we don't need to solve them, but we need to remain available to them. If we can do just that, then we can learn from the fullness of life's messages to us. We can learn from both teachers of love and teachers of cruelty. We can learn to appreciate the fullness of life because both things are coming at us. And if we can learn from each other in both ways, then we can spend all of our days together. Maybe so. Blessed be, and amen.
Dum 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 dum.
I am sitting here wanting memories to teach me to see the beauty in the world through my own eyes. Yes, I am sitting here wanting memories to teach me to see the beauty in the world through my own eyes. You used to rock me in the cradle of your arms. You said you'd hold me till the pains of life were gone. You said you'd comfort me in times like these, and now I need you, and now I need you. And you are gone. So I am sitting here wanting memories to teach me to see the beauty in the world through my own eyes. Since you've gone and left me, there's been so little beauty, but I know I saw it clearly through your eyes. Now the world outside is such a cold and bitter place. Here inside I have few things that will console. And when I try to hear your voice above the storms of life, then I remember that I was told. Yes, I am sitting here wanting memories to teach me to see the beauty in the world through my own eyes. Yes, I am sitting here wanting memories to teach me to see the beauty in the world through my own eyes. I think all the things that made me feel so wonderful when I was young. I think all the things that made me laugh, made me dance, made me sing. I think all the things that made me grow into a being full of pride. Think on these things, for they are true. And I am sitting here wanting memories to teach me to see the beauty in the world through my own eyes. I thought that you were gone, but now I know you're with me. You are the voice that whispers all I need to hear. I know a please and thank you, and a smile will take me far. I know that I am you, and you are me, and we are one. I know that who I am is numbered in each grain of sand. I know that I've been blessed again and again and again. Yes, I am sitting here wanting memories to teach me to see the beauty